So the generation clash. A lot of people, talk about technology is not for me, or there's a specific type of technology for me. We hear this all the time. At Hubspot, we work in the CRM, digital transformation, marketing automation space, and this is an ongoing discussion. So, whoever's in the chat room, or if you want to quickly just answer to yourself as well, a quick question is: given a choice, where would you like to work? If you want to put it in the chat, let us know. Based on previous discussions that we've had, an overwhelming majority, a lot of people automatically, without thinking too much, say Amazon. That's usually the result of this question. The reason for that being both of these companies are technically in the same space. They're in the retail space. However, it's the brand image, it's the fact that Amazon is still doing retail. It is selling a product from producer A to consumer B, but it's still a much more fancier, much more attractive brand, is predominantly because of their adoption of technology. One of the other things that stands out, especially when I'm watching old movies, is I remember you watch all these aircraft scenes from the 60s and Hollywood movies where it was cool to smoke on the flight. And people these days don't understand, especially teenagers or anyone who was born 80s or after, never really saw anything like this. It was absolutely perfect to smoke on the flight, and James Bond did it, everybody else did it. So the big question is, those 60s came to the 90s, and it was still cool to call the customer care at airlines to make bookings or change your flight. So I personally, myself, I've spent hundreds of hours on the phone with my electricity provider, with my airlines, with a train company, with the water company, with loads and loads of different organizations that would put me on hold or make me go through a certain process to get the service done. When, and most importantly, why did that change? If you think about being on the phone on a long hold or spending a lot of time on that, it's clearly not within the last 5 years. It's becoming less and less and less. So when we look at all of these changes that have occurred in the last 5 years, one thing to remember is that everybody, when they speak of sales and marketing, they talk about the funnel, that leads come into a funnel, leads go through different stages of a funnel. But effectively, what's happened is that the funnel is dead. What we're looking at now is the flywheel, which has completely replaced the funnel. If you look at this diagram here, the CRM would be at the core of your flywheel. So what is a CRM? It's just a fancy name a few software people gave it, but a CRM is basically where it's the most valuable asset that you have, your relationships, the people that you've done business with, the people that you plan to do business with. So it's a database of your customers, your leads, your contacts. The problem with the funnel is that people can only come in from the top. It's one way. People come in from the top, they come down, and they eventually become customers. With the flywheel, the huge difference is that an existing customer right here, for example, can still engage with you. An existing customer might come back through a customer service request and might turn into a prospect for a brand new upselling opportunity. Similarly, you might have promoters who are not actually your customers. These are people who still can't afford your product, but they really like what you do and what you sell. And these would be just incredible to have as promoters. A good example of this would be luxury cars. So a lot of people, if they like the most, if they're, let's say, promoters of Mercedes, and Mercedes comes out with a new super expensive car, these people are not necessarily the customers for that car. They can't afford that car, but at the same time, they'll be sharing images, videos. Every business has the opportunity to identify and nurture these promoters. But unfortunately, the funnel doesn't have provision for that. The funnel only talks about leads. So you need to keep in mind that there will be strangers, there will be prospects, there'll be existing customers, there'll be leads, there'll be promoters, and all of them together have no room in the funnel because that system is not provisioned for that. Whereas the flywheel can attract, engage, or delight any of these segments. And it's absolutely crucial that your sales, your marketing, your services, your operations, and your management are interlinked. I have a quick question here. Obviously, this isn't face to face. I would have loved to get an answer, but this is something you can think about your own organization as of right now and ask yourself this question. If your organization sells a product or a service which has room for improvement, let's say it's a product and it can go bad, there might be a support ticket open. Should you really be sending a happy clappy marketing newsletter to someone who has an open support ticket? That's like the worst time to send somebody an email. And unless all the systems are connected together, it wouldn't be possible. You'll actually send a happy newsletter to someone who's raised 3 support tickets already. So moving on, going back to the topic of today, which is what are some of the new technologies, or why is there a clash between older generation companies and newer technologies, and where we can meet in the middle? So the first challenge is something we hear quite commonly. My customers aren't online. We are a traditional business. I've even got an example. An example of this would be a real estate building material supplier. So somebody who supplies bricks, cement, stones for construction. This isn't the kind of business you'd expect to, do email nurturing because, there's construction workers buying product. There's literally really small freelance construction guys who come in, buy 500 bricks. So these customers always tell us that my customers are not online. We're a traditional business. We've never even had a website. Why do we need to spend on digital transformation, or why do we need to adopt technology? The question is, your customers aren't online. You've assumed they are not online. But are you online? Are you available in case they do plan to come online? Are you available for them? Or are you just assuming that they'll never look for you? What is the guarantee they won't? One of the questions we asked, and this is a real life example, I was working with one of the real estate building material suppliers, and they said our customers aren't online. I asked them, these construction workers who are your target audience, do you think they have mobile phones? They said yes. I asked them, do you think they have smartphones or just regular phones? They said smartphones. I asked them, do you think they have social media? Do you think they have their Facebook accounts, even if they're to connect to family and friends? Yeah, most likely they have Facebook on their smartphones. What are you doing as of today to show yourself on, let's say, that Facebook? Maybe they're not going to buy your product on Facebook, but how are you turning them into promoters? And this is a real life case study. What this company started doing was they created a Facebook group of funny videos of construction workers messing with each other. One guy climbing the stairs, the other guy throwing a little bit of paint on him. And at the end of each video, they just said, brought to you by, or it's good to have a little bit of fun, but you also need to make profit, and gave the name of their building material supplier company. Over a period of time, this Facebook group became the biggest, most popular group in the country for construction workers to kind of share funny videos and interact with each other. How did we correlate with, not my customers not being online, and sudden increase in profit once this group was up and functioning, and you had increase in traffic, you had increase in sales, and we put systems in place to attribute this Facebook group to an increase in sales. So the second factor that comes in is, what is the cost of inaction? What if you just keep assuming my customers aren't online? How much revenue do you potentially lose? Because if you think they're not online and you don't go online, or you don't spend money on digital transformation, your competitor would. And there is a cost to inaction. There's revenue that you're potentially losing every day. The third question you need to ask yourself is, have you genuinely exhausted all of the avenues? If you think they're not online, maybe there's something else. Maybe they prefer flyers. Maybe, if they prefer flyers, maybe put your Facebook page on that. So the biggest problem to adoption is simply a question of denial, where a lot of these traditional businesses that think their customers aren't online have just accepted it and are not willing to make the change. So I would be happy to, if you're in one of the businesses, if you think you have a business where your customers aren't online, I'd be happy to share some insights on what are some of the avenues you need to look at or possibilities you need to look at. The second challenge is our foundations are brick and mortar. We offer a tangible product. Business is done face to face. So this again, I think I've actually heard this from a lot of companies in Turkey as well, that we don't sell our product online. Our business is done face to face. We've got 40 salespeople. They've got motorcycles. They go office to office, and that's how we close business. A good example of this would be your local bank. Your local bank is brick and mortar. Whether they do digital stuff or not, they will be there. You're going to need them. They're going to need you. So it becomes insignificant. How has this industry changed over the last few years? I remember when I was a child, my father would take me, once a week to the bank just to get the logbook updated with the transactions. That concept, that monthly pilgrimage of going to the bank and getting data on your transactions, it's no longer required. I don't think anybody that I know even has that logbook anymore. Cross-selling is a lot easier with segmentation. A lot of these traditional companies, they still rely very heavily on outdoor. There'll be a big hoarding on the main highway that'll say, home loans just became easier. There'll be a man holding a child looks happy, man looks happy. But the problem is 90% of the customers for the bank, customers of the bank, are not really looking at a home loan. If you have demographic data, if you have behavior data of your customers, who's, kind of looking at schools, who's just taken out, who's opened a child account, when you have all of that analytics around your segments of customers, who's got a child recently, who's got married recently, who's applied for a new car loan, they might need a garage, they might need an extra bedroom in the house with the baby on the way. You'd be able to specifically target these people, and rather than spamming everyone, make it more targeted. Reduced costs. It was a big pull for banks. With the start of online banking, they could actually reduce massive overheads for branches. They didn't need as much staff. They didn't need as much infrastructure in place to support their customers. So banks are one of the oldest industries in most countries, but at the same time, this is a real clash where banks are still, in a way, even now, I can guarantee whatever city you're in, if you drive down, if you watch the television, you will see banks are still, using jargony things like, we are your local bank, your partner in growth. They don't need to do that as much. So there is a little bit of clash there, but the more they adopt technology, the more they'll see it is working in their favor. One of the prime examples here in Ireland, in a lot of European countries actually, is a new form of digital banking. There's companies like N26, there's companies like Revolut. They actually don't have a branch. There's no brick and mortar. These are all digital banks. And Revolut, for example, the company is, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, if not the top three, it is the top fintech disruptor in the banking space in Europe at the moment. And the company is literally less than 5 years old. So I think if you're in a business where you think your business is done face to face, it might be a good time to look at what are some of the opportunities to remove the face-to-face element and move more towards digital transformation. The third would be a legacy company, something that has built a very solid foundation. They are the market leaders, there's no competition, and we don't need an internet push. A good example of that would be McDonald's. So there's a McDonald's in every city in the world. It's one of the most recognizable brands in the world. They've done such good branding. You recognize the arches, you recognize the colors, and you think everybody knows them already. Why do they need branding? Why do they need advertising? And most importantly, why do they even need digital? But if you look at McDonald's and how they've transitioned within the last year, they've paid hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire an analytics company, an Israeli analytics company. It was a startup just to get better digital analytics. How do you combat revenue affecting content and address resistance? So that's the number one question for these kind of companies. So in McDonald's case, I don't know if a lot of you have seen it, but I remember a few years ago, there was a very popular video on YouTube going around being shared that if you keep a McDonald's burger in a glass jar, it doesn't decompose for 20 days, which means there's chemicals in there and we shouldn't be eating it. McDonald's could have decided just to leave that video there, but anyone who saw that video shared it with somebody else, and there was an unknown revenue impact of that video. How do you fight these content revenue assaults on your brand, even though your brand is strong? And how do you put a monetary value on it? How much money did we possibly lose because of that kind of content? So that is somewhere you would need, a very solid digital contingency strategy. The second would be increase revenue as buying patterns change. So, McDonald's has a fairly common menu, but they customize it to every single country. There's like a couple of local items that are only sold in those countries. Also, the buying patterns change. If I'm on paternity leave, if I just became a father, I'm more than likely to go through the drive-through every second day just to get something on my way. If I'm working from home, my buying pattern might change. This is precisely the reason why McDonald's is pushing more for order online, collect, delivery, and they want to capture all that data about your buying patterns, about your behaviors, because that digital analytics would provide them with enough product intelligence to actually change their product lines, change the pricing, change the frequency at which changes are done to their menu. Marry the offline with the online. If you can do that, that's just incredible. If you can get information if you can combine the people who are walking in, who are going through the drive-through through Bluetooth, it could be through a common, the mobile phone number could be the common denominator, it could be loyalty program. If you can combine all the activities offline as well as online for your prospective customers, then you have a very, very solid set of data that will make your business the number one in its category. Very few companies are successfully able to do that, but we will see that happening more and more within the next 5 years. The companies that overcome this transition and build an expertise in this segment will become the champions in their segment. We'll do a quick trend check. Irrespective of what city, what country you're in, if you've had to deal with a traditional company in the last 30 days, did you feel they could do a little bit more? For example, did you spend time on a phone call where you had to submit copies of documents, whether to a government department, whether to a private organization? You had to pick up receipt from a store, you had to go somewhere and pay a deposit, or you had to wait for a working day to get an answer, where you got an auto reply saying, "Thank you for your query. We're working hard," or "We only work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Wait for someone to come back into the office next day and come back to you." These are all classic examples of traditional companies that are struggling with adopting technology with both arms open. They have an email where you can send an email, but a human will look at it and reply on a working day. So this is where the transition needs to be complete, and this is where the clash comes in. I took the liberty of taking a local example. There is a local Turkish company, actually a global Turkish company now, that derives its name from an old civilization. So I'm sure most of you have either heard of it or are quite familiar of this company. I looked a little bit into the history of this company and why, going back to the example of why did they become the champions or the leaders in their segment. If we look at their history, this is what Wikipedia says. Hirit Computer Services is a private company that it's one of Turkey's biggest software exporters, with 83% of its customer base being overseas and 92% of its revenues coming from exports. It became the third largest service exporter of 2011. This is a very good example of a company that started in 1994 when the internet was barely starting out. If you look at the history of this company, they were one of the early adopters of technology. Despite being a company that was new, it was predominantly around travel, which, when you're in the travel industry, you work with airlines. Everybody kind of expects you to go there, meet them, business done face to face. But they realized that if they want to expand globally, they will have to adopt technology, especially internet and digital. And it was one of the top companies, or let's say one of the first few early adopters of technology in Turkey, where they went digital. If I'm happy to send a case study to whoever's interested. But the fact that they wanted to build this change, have a solid digital infrastructure and processes in place, made sure they became a leader in their segment. It is probably one of the best and one of the biggest uh, airline loyalty software companies at the moment. And it's one of the top companies in Turkey as well. The transition has been rapid. In the last 10 years, there's several examples of Turkish companies that have adopted technology, even though the product that they sell, whether it was agricultural machinery, whether it was something from the manufacturing sector, they adopted technology and they became champions and the leaders in their segment. So there's a very distinct and a very well-established pattern of companies becoming successful if they embrace technology. Something to take away from our little session today. Obviously, these are questions you need to answer to yourself. If you were your own company's customer as of today, how hard do you think it is for you to access a service, logic query, or get assistance over the weekend? Now, all of the entrepreneurs, all the marketing directors, salespeople who've joined us today, think of yourself as a customer for your company. And would you get assistance over the weekend, or is that still a roadblock? The second question you need to ask yourself is, look at your closest competitor. Whoever's your closest competitor, are they more digital than you? If so, first of all, what is it that's making them more digital? Do they offer online transactions? Do they have a portal that is self-help? Do they have a knowledge base? What is it that makes them more digital? And the second question is, if they could do it, what has held you back? Why did you not do it? The third question is finance, inventory, logistics. These are examples of a few departments in your organization that are not public facing and they don't need to be digital. There's no reason the finance team needs to be public facing. Do you feel there's basic information that doesn't flow from these units to sales and marketing? An example of that would be, as a salesperson, would you like to see what is the total value of purchases made by a customer in the last 10 months? I myself personally, I would love this information. If I'm going and meeting a customer and I have ready intelligence that tells me in the last 10 months they've bought X amount of dollars worth of products from us, I'd be able to place them comfortably in a segment, whether they're a high paying customer, they're high value, low value. There should be some sort of information flowing, and that is part of digital transformation. Your different departments can't operate in different silos. So ask yourself these three questions. And if you think you need more answers, if you need used cases, case studies from Turkey and beyond, feel free to contact me. These are my contact details, and hopefully we get to do this in person next year.